We had our podcast today, Dave, right as we were wrapping up our Fantasy Football Today podcast. Please download that wherever podcasts are found. You said, you spoke it into existence. What if we wake up tomorrow morning and Terry McLaurin signs a new deal? How will you feel about his fantasy value? That was the question you posed to me. We said goodbye. We clicked the off button. It was us, not Heath Cummings. And sure enough, right away, we get the report Terry McLaurin signs his 3-year, $96 million extension. So
why do they mess with us like that?
They were listening to our show because everybody else does. How do you feel about Terry McLaurin now that he's locked in for the next 3 years after missing the entirety of preseason, all of the entirety of training camp, all the preseason games as a hold-in? Is he back in your good graces as a top 4-round fantasy wide receiver?
He is. It's toward the end of round 4. I'm good with him as a top 50 type of pick now because I expect him to be back at practice, I don't know, today, tomorrow. As soon as the ink's dried on that contract, he's going to be out there, and he's going to have a helmet and pads on, and he's going to be working to get his timing down again with Jayden Daniels. I think he's going to need more than 2 weeks before week 1 to really get it right. Let's give him a grace period of 2 weeks. So when you draft Terry McLaurin, assume the first 2 weeks of the season might not be peak Terry McLaurin. But after that, there's a week 3 game they play against Las Vegas. That secondary isn't very good. I could see Terry McLaurin starting to kick things into high gear then. And this was a great stat that Josh Norris looked up and posted on social media, and I piggybacked off it. 11 red zone touchdowns for Terry McLaurin in his first 80 games. 10 last year with Jayden Daniels, and 7 of the 10 came in the back half of last year when Jayden Daniels was really finding himself as a thrower. His numbers in fantasy really lit up. I'm kind of excited about him now, but I don't want to reach for him, and I'm afraid that's what's going to happen, Jamie, is that people are going to see this news, and they're going to run to Terry McLaurin like nothing was ever wrong, and they're going to take him in round 3, and that feels just a little too rich for me.
Dan, when you look at the signing of McLaurin, as Dave alluded to, last year he was great. But what we saw last year was targets relatively the same, catches relatively the same, yards relatively the same, spike in touchdowns. As we see here, 13 touchdowns. There was no Deebo Samuel. We'll see what changes now with the backfield without Brian Robinson there. Obviously, we're expecting it better. Jayden Daniels, which could lead to better production from Terry McLaurin. But just your assessment of the Commanders' offense and where Terry McLaurin sort of fits in for you.
Yeah, for me, he's not someone I'm rushing to draft, and this is because I think he's one of the prime touchdown regression candidates, as you mentioned. Now, I thought that stat was excellent, Dave, but one of my concerns is the addition you mentioned of Deebo Samuel. I've liked what I've seen from Deebo Samuel this preseason. I know he had that one clip going around early in training camp in the spring. People thought he might be out of shape. He looked pretty good on his first touch of the preseason, and I think he's a perfect fit for that scheme. McLaurin, to me, is a player who will not get a heavy volume enough to justify what I think is a pretty high ADP.
It's going to be interesting to see where his ADP goes because he's been kind of hovering in that round 4 or 5-ish range. As Dave said, we may see him get pushed back up into, I think, maybe the middle of round 4. So when we're talking about wide receivers like Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, depending on where George Pickens goes, kind of those type of wide receivers, I'm just going to basically say I'm out on still Terry McLaurin. I know this is great news, the fact that he got in still, over a week plus before the start of the regular season, and I think you're right. It may take a couple of weeks, and then hopefully he's back to being exactly where he was. But I think Dan said it best. We're going to see some touchdown regression. Whether he goes from 13 to 10, that's still pretty good. If he goes from 13 to kind of that 5-6 range, which is where he's been his entire career, then we could be in a little bit of trouble for Terry McLaurin. And I'll just go back to this very small sample size, small group of players. The hold-ins, the holdouts from the last 2 seasons, all but Jamar Chase. We're talking about Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor in 2023, CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Ayuk last year. The other one is Chase. Chase was awesome, won the Triple Crown. Those other 5 guys, those 4 guys, they all struggled with their production and dealt with injuries the last 2 years. So we'll see what happens for them. And we'll also see what happens